I'm so glad we're doing this.
I think it'll be really interesting. We're going to learn a lot.
Yes, we are. So, hi, Deb. How are you doing?
I'm good, Annabelle. How are you?
I'm doing great. I think I would be doing better if I didn't have to read all these discouraging news about the election. So it's keeping me up at nights every time I spend even just like 10 minutes online reading the news. I start feeling like my blood pressure going up. um, but what you're doing, Deb, is so important that I really wanted to introduce you to the audience on Talk on Main Street and beyond, and to ask you to help us. We need help figuring out what to do about all the disinformation out there that drives us crazy or that confuses us, and the fact that it could have real impact on the election. So if you could just maybe introduce yourself a little bit, like your background and why this is so important to you. So take it away.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for suggesting this conversation. I think it's going to be really great to talk, not just between the two of us, but to let some other people come into this conversation. It's going to make it a lot more interesting. I'm Deb Lavoy. I spent the early part of my career working as a technologist and software engineer, and then moved into marketing. Spent most of my career, about 20 years, as a marketing executive. And in the last 5 of them in particular, focusing and specializing on understanding narratives, how we build them, what makes them effective, and how they grow and propagate online. So late in 2015, early 2016, I started realizing that there were some bad people out there who were taking over the tools of marketing and the tools of narrative. Instead of doing good things with them, they were using them as a way to spread propaganda and disinformation, and that it was working really well. And I found that kind of personally offensive. And I was a little surprised how little people seemed to be aware of how online platforms were enabling this in a lot of different ways, partly because of the very granular way you can target people on Facebook, especially, and related platforms like Instagram, partly because of how people can get into communities and use them to say ridiculous, unsubstantiated things and get those things amplified. And then once those amplification algorithms pick something up, other outlets pick those up. So disinformation was starting to spread like wildfire, and it was coming out of these sort of really extremist, edgy places into more of the mainstream. And so I've spent basically the last 4 years trying to figure out what I can do about it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's fantastic. I feel like we've all been barraged, right, with so much disinformation. And sometimes I get to the point where I almost just feel like giving up. Like, why do I even bother trying to help people figure out the truth, or for me to spend my time trying to figure out the truth? And it's great that, as a professional, like you've decided that you're going to help this country by doing this, So can you help us, tell us, like, what can we do about disinformation that's spreading right now? Like, for example, the birtherism conspiracy theory about Kamala Harris. Like, even my mother brought this up today. She said, "Oh, I heard that Kamala Harris is not eligible. That's such a shame." And I was so frustrated. I just wanted to just throw up my hands and and
So
that's
yeah,
a
I
great
know.
example of something that makes me just feel awful about being online. So what do we do about that?
So, and this is exactly the thing, right? So we all know people who always believed in conspiracy theories. They believed in Area 51, or would read the National Enquirer and think that all of that stuff is true. Most people didn't. These days, more and more people are believing more and more insane things, and there are reasons for that. The reason I decided this was important was kind of what you said. I have a son. He's really smart. He's in college. He's a really good student, but he doesn't care about politics or the news. It's never something he's been engaged in. And so he sees headlines and he doesn't know how to tell whether they're true or not, or worse, and more often, he gets them secondhand, right? And he's skeptical of everything. He doesn't believe anyone because he thinks everyone has an agenda and is trying to fool him. So how do you talk to someone like that? That's really important for me, just as it is with you and your mom, right? So I want to sort of tease apart a couple of different kinds of people and then get back to that Kamala Harris thing, right? There are some people who are really, really deeply engaged with disinformation. They have kind of chosen to leave the shared reality that we all lived in together once upon a time, or the vast majority of us did, and choose a different reality space. That's more than disinformation. That is a very complicated subject, and I'd love to come back, particularly with a friend of mine who studies cults, to talk about how people just swap reality spaces and what happens there. Those people are very hard to talk to, but most people, many people, are simply confused because outlets that seem legitimate are sharing news that is not legitimate. So here I have a picture here of one of the memes. I'll share my screen for a second. Of the meme you just referenced.
Yes.
So this, so this is the one you're talking about.
Oh,
it's very offensive. It's very racist. And I want to talk to you about a couple of things right there, right? First of all, it's offensive, right? It's an emotional thing. One of the things that most disinformation leads with, this is a very effective rhetorical technique, is it leads with emotions, not facts. Now, this thing, it has some facts there. Birth certificate indicates Jamaican father, true. Caucasian Indian, dot, not feather. So that's both not even real and also kind of racist. Mother.
Very not racist, in my opinion.
It's extremely racist. Responsible journalism doesn't do that. So this is your first hint that this may not be coming from a reliable place, right? And then the second thing that says she's not eligible because there's no proof that her father and mother were US citizens at the time of her birth. That's not how citizenship works in the United States. In the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, which was part of how the United States responded to ending the Civil War and the problem of slavery, the 14th Amendment says, in brief, if you're born here, you're a citizen. And that made all the slaves citizens. They hadn't been before, and gave them voting rights, etc. pretty important part of the history of the United States. Kamala Harris was born in Oakland. No one contests that. So they're giving you they're pretending to give you facts here, but they're not, they're lies and distortions rather than facts, even though they're presented as facts. So I want to give you some hints as to how to deconstruct something like this. So as I say, one of the key hints that something might be disinformation, might not be true. And this is hard to say and it's hard to do, but the more you want it to be true, the more satisfying it is to you if it were true, the more likely it is to be false. That's when you need to get really, really skeptical. If your first response is, aha, or that's awful, or you have sort of an immediate emotional response to something that somehow validates something you thought all along is true, get very skeptical. Stop yourself and say, wait, I want this to be true. I better make sure that it's true. Other hints that we had right here, very racist language. So this is clearly not coming from a legitimate source. So I want to talk to you about the sniff test. So when that alarm bell goes off in your head and you say, aha, and you say, oh no, wait, I got to stop and check this. You want to give it a sniff test. The first thing you should think about with a sniff test is the source. And I don't mean whether your husband sent it to you or your best friend or your boss or whoever else is in your community, but where is the item itself coming from? Where is it hosted? Is it on Facebook? Is it in a Facebook group? Is it an article from a website? If that website is not known to you, you should be very careful about trusting it without verification. You may want to look it up. You're going to want to get a second opinion. Mm-hmm. So you may have already discounted it because you see language that reputable journalists don't use, that really racist tropes of, feather not dot or Caucasian Indian. I don't even know what that means. Those aren't real things.
An anchor baby.
The
term anchor
right.
baby is like such a racist term. Yeah.
The term anchor baby is a racist term that is a very political term. The fact of the matter is, if you are born in the United States, you are granted citizenship. That is a very fundamental part of how the United States came to be. It's a very important part of its history. When instead of discussing immigration policy in a meaningful way, people who opposed immigration policy started talking about this idea of an anchor baby. And it's a terribly racist term. It is meant to make you think that people are immigrating to the United States for bad purposes rather than for good purposes, right? Most people who immigrate into the United States are coming here because they think that they can find opportunities to do good things in the future. Some people immigrate here because where they're coming from isn't safe. Some people immigrate here because of the incredible opportunities in education and business, and the fact that in the United States, historically, anyone can do anything in theory. So the idea of an anchor baby is the idea of saying that some immigrants are bad or unworthy, and it's not okay. It's a terrible thing to say.
So I guess the question is, what do we do when we see something like this, or we hear it spreading? Okay, what should us ordinary citizens do in response to this?
So the first thing you need to do is find out if it's true. So first of all, it's not true. None of this is true. She is completely eligible. She was born in Oakland. That makes her a citizen. She's eligible to be president of the United States. I think she's over 37 years old, which is the other eligibility criteria. So the first thing you should do is go to Google. Depending on the news sites that you typically visit, you might see a variety of sources. Look for the most legitimate sources. In this case, this rumor started because a right-wing Fox News commentator wrote an op-ed, wrote an opinion piece in Newsweek. Within hours of that thing being published, nearly dozens and dozens and dozens of lawyers, experts, etc., published counter arguments to this. If you go search on Google, you will find, you may find a bunch of memes. You may find his article, but you'll also find dozens of things explaining why that article was absolute racist nonsense. The trouble is, most of those explanations are very complicated, right? Instead of just saying, she was born in Oakland, she's a citizen, that's the end of the conversation. They get into the history of the 14th Amendment and the details, and they really, really pick it apart. This is part of why the people pushing disinformation are so very effective, right? They push out these super simple things, and many of the people trying to counter that disinformation are pushing out these super complicated things. That's part of what our team is trying to solve, rather than giving you a 1,200 word explanation about why that is. We'll just say, you may have heard this rumor. Mm-hmm. Here's what's really true. Mm-hmm. According to the 14th Amendment, if you were born here, you're a citizen. Full stop. And then if you want more detail than that, we'll link you to places that have more detail than that. But the reason disinformation is so effective is because it's really simple, it's easy to remember, and it's repeated all the time. It gets shared and shared and shared. You hear it 1,000 times, you start to think it's true.
Exactly. It's repetition, right? And so I think that's why I feel like the right wing has been so successful, is because they've created an infrastructure for repetition, the bots and the trolls and all the people who have their brains kind of networked with each other through things like Fox News and Daily Caller and some of these other, right-wing sites. I feel like they're so good at creating these memes. It's almost like they, come out of nowhere, but they're suddenly everywhere. And then it starts to infect people like my mother, who doesn't watch the Daily Caller. She doesn't watch Fox News, but somehow she gets exposed to this, and she's not a Trump supporter at all, right? She's almost violently opposed to Trump. She's very upset with Trump. But then she gets exposed to this, like, oh, too bad Kamala Harris is not eligible, and that's why I want to work with you and your team to figure out like how we can, all of us here, arm ourselves with some way of countering this.
So these little bits of information, these it's not even the memes and the images, it's these really short statements that get amplified through bot networks and that sort of thing, and trolls and that sort of thing. But what's really dangerous about those things is that once they get to a certain level of noise, the platform algorithms, so Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all of these different platforms, they look for what's popular, and anything that seems to be getting a lot of action, they push it harder. So they use an algorithm to decide what people care about, and they push it harder. So it's not just that there are bot networks out there, it's that the bot networks know how to manipulate these algorithms, and then they get really popular, and then they get picked up by news outlets, right? They certainly get picked up by some of the really extremist ones that you were talking about, Breitbart, the Daily Caller, some of those sorts of things, but then they get picked up by Fox News, then they get picked up by politicians and sources that we grew up thinking are trustworthy, right? And then they get into the general conversation because they're such little bits, they're very viral. They naturally get into the general conversation. So what we want to do, so they'll come out of the mouths of your mom or my son, not because they watch Fox News, not because they are indoctrinated into a certain worldview, but because they're just on the wind and they naturally get into people's heads. So what we want to do at Reality Team is use these same methods, but in an ethical way. So instead of 10,000 words about why Kamala Harris really is a citizen, we just want to tell you, Kamala Harris was born in Oakland. That makes her a citizen according to the 14th Amendment. Kamala Harris is a citizen. You want more information?
Yeah.
That's great. Here's more information. What
Do
we
you
want to
think
do
that,
is...
oh yeah, I'm just curious though. I think it's great to reduce all the noise into these sound bites, and I think that's absolutely needed. And I love that, you with your marketing background, like you could make that engaging, right? But I guess I'm just wondering, like, are there places we could go to just do quick fact checks instead of Googling? Because Googling, as you said, I mean, there is an algorithm to Googling. And so I'm just wondering if Google is not going to work that well with people who are right-wing people. They're going to get the right-wing hits. So like, I mean, Snopes.com, or I mean, factcheck.org. I mean, are there places that you go to that you know has done all that fact checking and vetting?
So yes, that's a good question. Let me share my screen here for just another second. Google is sometimes the evil empire and sometimes darn helpful, right? They have this thing called Factcheck Explorer. And if you just Google Factcheck Explorer, this will come up. And you can put here, Kamala Harris ineligible. And thankfully, because it's Google, it'll even fix your typos. And if you search on that, what it will do is actually bring up all the fact checks that have been done on this. Factcheck.org is very reliable. It's a really good one. Snopes is also very good, although the Disinformation team, and we can talk more about who those people really are at some point, but they've cast doubt on Snopes for some reason, but Snopes is actually very reliable. Factcheck Factcheck.org is very reliable. There is a New York Times fact checker, and then a guy named Daniel Dale, who is great. But I recommend coming here first. Factcheck.org is almost always the first site that comes up, and it will give you a quick take. Now, their quick take is still kind of long, right? It's a lot of words. You have to pay a lot of attention to decode it. But it says that Kamala Harris, former Vice President Joe Biden's running mate, is eligible to serve as US president, contrary to the false claims of viral posts on Facebook. Her mother is from India and her father is from Jamaica, but Harris was born in Oakland, California. That will give you the facts. My only quibble with this is it still takes a lot to digest that 2 sentences. Factcheck.org, I think they have made mistakes in the past, but they're quite careful. And when they do make mistakes, they always own it and fix it very quickly. So I think they're a very highly reliable source.
Okay. So we just have to get into the habit of checking on things like factcheck.org. But can you send me the link to that Google Toolbox? I did not know about that Google.
Yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, I did not know about this. This is great. It's super helpful.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna use this. This is fantastic. I just well, also wanted to ask you. Let's say someone posts the meme that you shared earlier on your screen. What is the best way for us to counter that? Like, should we be commenting? Check out this factcheck.org about that. Should we engage people?
Yeah. So again, be careful who you're engaging, because you can use all of your energy doing this. So be thoughtful about who you're engaging. If someone is always, am I allowed to use a bad word? If someone is always poop posting here, if you know it's someone who's always shit posting and posting inflammatory stuff that they probably know is wrong, is a lie, but they don't care, you may not want to engage there. It's not going to help. But if it's someone like your mother or my son, who wouldn't be caught dead on Facebook because he's 20, but he's in other places, there are a couple of ways to sort of engage more effectively. First of all, try to avoid posting mad. Every single one of us has been taken in by disinformation. There are in fact a lot of great things out there that are sort of quizzes to teach you how to be better at distinguishing disinformation from real information. And I do not get perfect scores when I take them, and I'm pretty attuned to this sort of thing. We all fall for disinformation. Those guys are good at this, okay? So try not to get mad. Nobody wants to be told they're stupid. Even if your first reaction is, that's so stupid, and it's racist, and what are you thinking? That's not really going to help someone. So when you're not mad anymore, come back and engage kind of gently and say, I see where you got that from, and I can see why that might make sense to you. But these guys have actually researched the issue, and I think you should look at what they know about this. And try to be compassionate, right? Oh, you got tricked. I've gotten tricked before. But here's where the truth lies.
Yeah. Yeah, what I did was I let out a primal scream when my mom said that.
Yeah, I can understand why you would.
I was so upset. So yeah, I have to exercise some self-control because I am very emotional often when talking about politics. It's really
Yeah.
hard not to because I'm scared, really scared. And so I have to be able to kind of remind myself that it's not effective if I'm screaming and being condescending and emotional. I have to like be able to engage her in a respect or anybody in a respectful way. I mean, my mom doesn't do this normally. She just happened to do it today, and I got very upset. But it just takes so much like self-discipline to do that, right?
Well, it's
And
not just
to yeah,
self-discipline, it's practice,
yeah,
right? And I think you know a lot about that. You've told me about how you've spent time talking to people who you disagree with to teach yourself how to listen as well as how to talk.
yeah. And it's true. But even then, because I'm so upset about this election, that it's like hard for me to like control myself, you know.
So
And
one
I've
thing I
been
want to say
doing,
about
yeah,
that fear,
hmm
if you're not afraid, you're not paying attention. This is time to be afraid. That fear you're feeling, that anxiety you're feeling, that's real. We're in a situation where 80 days from now, we could see the end of democracy as we know it. And 6 months, 8 months ago, when I said these sorts of things, and I thought about the kinds of ways I thought that democracy was being undermined, I thought, I can't say this out loud. People are going to think I'm insane. I sound like a paranoid lunatic, but I no longer feel like I am a paranoid lunatic. I think that this is actually true. We have to help people connect to reality. People are confused. As I say, there's sort of three groups of people. There's what I call the reality team, right? We're the people who follow news fairly carefully. We're generally well informed. We can usually tell truth from reality. Then there is the people who I consider indoctrinated. These are the people that have, for whatever reason, in whatever way, disengaged from our shared reality. They are no longer questioning the nonsense they see. Then there are the people who just get confused, right? And it's fair, and we're all in there sometimes. Those are the people we should care about. In 80 days, there's nothing you can do for those people who are constantly sharing racist, inflammatory memes because they watch Fox News all day or for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
We have to focus on the people that we can actually talk to and who want to talk to us, right?
Yeah.
People don't like being confused. They don't like being manipulated. And they also don't like being condescended to.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to pull together. We have to do what we're doing now, which is talking about how do you do this? How do you keep your temper?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go for real information? What is the soundbite that we can develop together to help people understand this quickly?
Yes.
And then
yes.
use each other as a network to share that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation. I hope we do it again. Like I'm hoping you come back, at least once a week, so we could share tips and you could kind of break down another piece of this information that's floating around because it's coming at us so quickly, and some of them really stick. I'm afraid this Kamala Harris is not eligible thing is going to stick, and it really upsets me. But I also want to point out that there are people who just really don't care if it's not true. They love seeing us triggered. It's like a sport or a game. They call it owning the libs or libtards, whatever they call us. And so they just think it's funny. They think it's funny to see us get into a tizzy, you know, and they shared this stuff for that reason. And so I think we have to kind of go into this feeling like, oh, we're not going to give them that pleasure, that benefit, you know, that we're not going to get so triggered. And so I'm trying to work on staying calm, not getting triggered, because that's what they want, you know. And it takes I think what I'm doing lately is like asking some of my friends to join me in a kind of pact, almost to say we're going to stay calm, we're going to stay focused on winning the election, which a lot of it means just turnout, making sure people know how to vote. And I think it's very important to counter disinformation, but not to spend 5 hours a day just online arguing with people. Right.
Yeah, arguing doesn't. So a couple of things you said there I think are extremely important. The most important thing you can do in the next 80 days is vote. And there are people trying to make it harder to do. So here's what, before we get into the rest of it, here's what everyone really needs to do right now. First of all, go check your voter registration status. Even if you have voted in the same place for years and decades, check anyway. There have been voter roll purges. Just don't take the chance. Double check your registration. If you go to vote.org and you tell them your address, they'll take you to your state or jurisdiction's voter registration page, and you can check right there. It's not very hard to do online. The second thing is to check whether you can vote early or request a mail-in ballot. And this brings me to my second concern about disinformation and the election. One of the biggest themes of disinformation right now is around the election, particularly around voting by mail. There is absolutely no evidence to suggest that vote by mail promotes fraud or is easy to tamper with. In fact, the security around vote by mail is excellent. It is that excellence of security that actually makes it take longer to vote, to count mail-in ballots than in-person ballots. So there's two things going on here. Number one, the president himself is saying that vote by mail causes fraud. There's absolutely no basis of truth to this. Number two, he's saying, oh, the results are going to take a long time to come in. It's true. If a lot of people vote by mail, you won't get the results on election night like we're used to. The results will come in over a matter of days or even a week, because it takes longer to verify mail-in ballots. So I'm going a little deep there, but the disinformation I'm most worried about right now is not about Kamala Harris. It's about voting. The thing you need to do is make sure you vote. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you get a ballot. Make sure you know how to return that ballot. Follow the instructions very, very carefully. Vote early or in person if you prefer. So getting back to the other thing. What was the other thing? I went down a tangent there.
Maybe that I was saying that I made a pact with my friends to stay calm.
Oh, yeah.
And focus on just turning out the vote, and not spend 5 hours a day arguing with people online.
Yeah. So I do think it's worth spending some time making sure you're informed and gently directing people, understanding why they may have gotten confused, and sharing accurate information with them. That's worth some time. arguing with people online is a soul suck, right? And it doesn't, unless you are really having an in-depth debate, and very little of what goes on online is really a debate. It's really just shouting at each other. Shouting isn't helping. We don't have a lot of time. We need each other. I think this pact you're talking about with your friends is really important. In the ideal world, we'd start a conversation here with people who might be watching this. Tell us what's confusing you. Tell us what you're hearing that is troubling and you're not sure whether to believe it or not. Maybe we can help with that.
Yeah,
tell us,
definitely.
Let's have this conversation. Let's bring people into it to talk about what the best way is to engage with people who may be confused, the best way to keep ourselves grounded in reality and to share that most effectively. And as you say, the most important thing is that you vote, that you encourage other people to vote. If you have kids, teenagers, young adults in their 20s that are your children or your nephews or your associates, those are the people least likely to vote. Encourage them to make sure they're registered and know how to vote.
Mm-hmm. You actually teed me up for a pitch. At Count Me In to Win, we're actually trying to ask people to reach out to their personal network. Make a list of 100 people, friends, family, colleagues, neighbors, Facebook friends, prioritizing people in battleground states, and help them create a plan to vote. So you give them information on things like mail-in ballots, voter registration deadlines, resources like vote.org, and check in with them throughout the process to say things like, hey, just want to remind you that your early voting starts next week. Or have you registered to vote because the deadline is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just kind of check in with people and really leverage our personal relationships, because people don't trust institutions. They don't trust leadership. They don't trust institutions. But hopefully there are some people who do trust us as individuals.
Yeah. So one of the things we're going to do that might help that is we have pulled all the key dates for all the states. Voter register, you can register to vote anytime up to a certain deadline. We'll remind you when that is. When can you start requesting absentee ballot? When does your ballot have to be returned? If you are voting through the mail, make sure you do it as soon as possible for, reasons we can get into. You probably know about them, but don't wait till the last minute. Vote right away. So we'll be helping to keep you aware of those dates and those times for each of the jurisdictions.
Oh, that's fantastic. We definitely need that.
Yeah. And I agree. The one thing that one of the things I've learned from volunteering in the past, particularly with Get Out the Vote organizations, is that there are two things that really increase voter turnout more than anything else. One is a personal touch. So talking to someone and saying, please make sure to vote. Actually, a personal invitation to vote, it seems like, really makes a difference. The second thing is that people need a plan to vote. So in normal years, that meant that they would ask us to get people to fill out this card that says, this is my voting place. I'm going to go before work, on my way home from work, when I go pick up the kids, think through in their head how they're going to do it in advance. In these times, it's a little more complicated. So we're going to have to help people come up with those voting plans that are slightly more complicated. But once you've sort of planned in your mind how you're going to vote, you are much more likely to actually do it.
Exactly. No, there's been studies on that. I just want to show you something that I just whimsically did last night.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I posted this on my personal page and then got quite a response of my friends saying, yes, I promise. Hundreds of people saying that. And then I posted it on this page and you see how popular it was, like 4.6 thousand people liked it, reacted to it, over 630 comments, over 850 shares. Because the idea that some of us may not vote is really scary. Like I know people don't like Trump, like majority of us, I think, don't like Trump, but I think that because there's so many barriers to voting, including that confusion that's by design, the chaos, I think people are going to say, oh, you know what? It's not worth it for me to go. I hope other people go. And they just may lack the will necessary to get it done.
So what's beautiful is that in posting that, you've identified this huge community of people who find that meaningful. What we need to do is take the next step and make it not just meaningful, but easier. We need to help remove the barriers. And that is getting them the resources like vote.org. There's a number of organizations that are now doing some really nice visualizations. If you look at 538, they just put up a really nice map with some dates on it per state. But vote.org is very comprehensive. If you go there, encourage people to go there. You could reach out to the people who like that. Say, if you go to vote.org today, let's all commit to checking our registration status. It will take you a minute to check your registration status online. Just everyone
absolutely.
Commit registration status. The next day you can say, okay, let's all make sure that we have in our calendar when we can request, when early voting starts, when you can request a ballot, and guide them through that process. This community is beautiful here and they do care.
Oh yeah, no, they do. And I guess that's what ultimately makes me feel hopeful, even though I'm scared to death, that there are so many of us. And that I believe, like, my theory of change is that it's really about finding ways to empower people at this very grassroots, person to person level. That we're not going to get saved by a person or a candidate or even the party. We're going to save ourselves. We're going to save
absolutely.
ourselves. And that
we're going to do it together, but
even though I really sometimes hate Facebook, but it has allowed me to connect with so many people. And I just want to share this page that I would love for people to go to, and I dropped a link to this. But this is our effort. We're trying to organize this and trying to provide tools and empower people to get out 100 voters in their network. And if 10 of us do it I'm in Pennsylvania, that's 1,000 people in Pennsylvania. That could be the margin of victory. If we could recruit 10 more people and those people recruit 10 more, then soon we're looking at 10,000. And so we really could make a difference if we locked arms and just get determined to vote and know that we're doing it for ourselves and for other people, our families, because I am totally in agreement with you, Deb. I think that if we don't work hard right now, we are going to lose our democracy, and it's going to be really hard to come back from whatever it is Trump will continue to do, which is really just sabotage our country, like break our country. So I don't know. I'm so desperate about it. Yeah.
So everyone who is already part of this community must vote. You're absolutely right. And guiding them to do so is one of the most patriotic acts you can, and that you can do right now. A couple things to note. We spend so much time thinking about it, you and I, and probably, maybe some other people in this community, that we think people understand and are thinking about this stuff as much as we are. In fact, that's not true. And so that tells us we have to do a couple things. Number one, we need to repeat ourselves more than we think. If we say something once, we think we've covered it, right? But that's not true. Repeating yourself feels tedious to you, but it's actually really important to those people who aren't as obsessed as we are. The second thing is that the number of undecided voters, it seems right now like everyone's saying, oh, Trump's losing, Biden's winning, but the margin is not huge. And the margin in the swing states is even smaller. And there are plenty of undecided voters in those states. It's important that we help people it's important that we help people understand truth from reality. It's extremely important that we don't let them get taken in by election disinformation. There's going to be more shenanigans. It's not just screaming fraud. It's not even just messing with the post office. We're going to see fake ballots being sent to people. We're going to see lies about dates and times and that sort of thing, and how to vote and where to vote. And we're going to need to be very vigilant about that. We're going to make sure that we are constantly fact checking and that we're sharing those things quickly and widely.
Mm-hmm. Right. So how do people connect with you and the work? I mean, I'm hoping you come back regularly. Hopefully, I'm thinking once a week, because
delighted.
Honestly, you would be at least saving my sanity, but I think you could also save our country just by helping us figure out how to do this. We really need help. We need guidance. And it would definitely calm me down for sure to be able to talk to you about these things. So please come back. But how should we connect? Should we create a Facebook page? Should we just go to your website? What do you think?
So we have stubbed out a Facebook page and are getting ready to work on it. We do have a website, realityteam.org. It's not quite beautiful right now, but we're working on it. It's going to be beautiful within a couple of weeks. On Twitter, if you happen to be Twitterish, you can follow Reality Team 11.
Okay. Reality Team 11.
And I'll give you the link to our Facebook page if people want to come there. And we're going to be posting regular fact checks, simple things like Kamala was born here. She's a citizen. There really is no other further conversation on it than that. And certainly we have a team of people who are scanning the environment for and looking for disinformation on a few subjects. We are very focused on election disinformation because we're afraid that that's the most dangerous thing.
Yeah.
And then there are a few other topics we'll be talking about a lot as well. And again, if anyone in your audience and in your circles is hearing stuff that's confusing to them, or they're not quite sure, or even if they know it's not true, but they're not quite sure how to explain it, come to us. Send us an email through our website or just info@realityteam.org, or connect with us on Twitter or on the Facebook page. Ask those questions. You'll be doing us a service by helping us know what's worrying you, and hopefully we can do you a service by helping to sort those issues out.
Yeah, I would love to collaborate also and really maybe combine our efforts, because we're trying to train our volunteers to spot disinformation and combat it. And so we would love to just work very closely with you to help people feel empowered with skills on how to deal with this. And to
Absolutely.
know that like there's a supportive network, because feeling alone right now, I think, is the most dangerous feeling, that we're alone and we're scared. We don't know what to do. We don't know who can help us. And so I think we got to just kind of start to kind of build this house where people are working together, but there's some division of labor. Like you're working on disinformation, I'm working on trying to recruit volunteers,
I
and
think that's
we
a
don't have a lot
beautiful.
of time.
We do
Yeah.
not have time. The one thing
No,
we
we
do
don't.
not have is time.
Yeah.
And we need all hands on deck. And if you think you're not smart enough or not good enough, or it doesn't matter. None of us are smart enough or good enough. None of us know everything.
Right.
But we know that we need each other. We know that this is important, and we know that this is the time to act. And every small act, ask a question, share something you've learned, whether it's countering a piece of disinformation, or if you just had a good conversation where, you showed Kamala the 14th Amendment, you showed your mother the 14th Amendment, and she said, oh, Kamala is eligible. Share that, because those successes are going to be really important too.
Although her reaction to my screaming was so funny. She's like, oh, I guess that was wrong. I felt bad that I was screaming. I just was kind of at my wit's end with all the attacks on her. And it hurts. It does hurt, especially because, she is from an immigrant family, and I'm an immigrant. Actually, I was not born here. I was born in South Korea, and she's a woman, and she's half Asian, and it just makes me hurt. Like I do take it personally sometimes. Anyway, but let's do this again. Let's figure out how we can work clososely. And please, you can come back absolutely anytime you want to come back. We're here. And
Great.
Let us know how we can support your work. Maybe we can create like something to make sure that you're supported, because I'm sure you're spending a lot of time on this. And so we got to make sure that you're able to feed yourself. Don't
This is my full-time job now. I left. I was a partner in a marketing agency, and I left to do this full-time because I feel like it's now or never, and this is what needs to be done. So I'm doing this full-time. I think your community and mine can really help each other, because we're developing these bits of information, and you're developing relationships with communities, and our bits of information need to go to the communities.
Right.
So we need each other to make it work. We need each other for support. And thank you for introducing me to your community. I can't wait to get to know it better.
Thank you so much. And we'll do it again soon. Thank you. Really appreciate this. I feel better already. I'm not going to let out any more primal screams about all the conspiracy theories.
Oh, well, let's not make promises we might not be able to keep. But the thing is, when you have an alternative to the primal scream, when there's something else you can do, it helps you not be so frustrated, and it helps you take that energy and make it constructive. So I'll try hard to help you not need the primal scream.
Yes, you could save me on a lot of therapy bills. So thank you. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Annabelle. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and The Talk on Main Street. To learn more, find us on Facebook at The Talk on Main Street.